Welcome back. We're the LorcanaTwins, and we are here with another video. This time we're going to be talking about the big tournament we recently competed in called the Pack Return of the Mim. And let me just say, that Mim, she did return a whole lot to the board, back to people's hands. You know, I might have been playing her in my deck myself, but it was a very fun event with 270 players, so it was almost as big as the largest one, which was a couple weekends prior. And this time, my brother was also able to compete, so we both played. And we thought today we'd share with you the decks we each played, and how it went. So I know we played different decks, and we didn't share any of the ink colors, so have a little variety there to look at.
Yes, so it was a very fun event. The first day was 9 rounds, and we didn't make it past day 1, but we played every round out to see how it would go, and we had a lot of fun in the process. It was very smooth the way it was run.
And we got close. We went 7-2, and then he went 6-3. So it was, right on the cusp there. I know there were 2 people in the top 8 that also had 7-2 records. So almost made it that way, but their tiebreaker was a lot better than mine. And then
some very tight games overall. Ones that were really close. Could have went one way or the other, but we'll get into that a little bit more as we discuss the decks we played and some of the matchups we had.
And as you can see here, the finale was actually between a Ruby Amethyst deck and the Amber Emerald Mufasa deck, which was a lot of fun to watch. I know the Amber Emerald Mufasa list was just recently becoming popular, so I thought it was really exciting and cool to see it make it all the way to the final of the tournament. And it went to 3 games, the final. Ruby Amethyst did get it done in the end, which, isn't a huge surprise, but I really think it could have went either way, especially if the aggressive deck on the right was, able to have an amazing curve.
But yeah, Ruby Amethyst definitely showing off how consistent it is. Consistently getting in the top 8, and it has won the past 3 tournaments that were run via this platform. So it's been a good time for Ruby Amethyst players, of course, but without further ado, we will get into our decks and kind of talk about our run during this tournament.
All right, so I played this list right here. I called it Shadow Questers, and I went 7-2 with it and was able to get 17th place. Now, it's not like the high-end control type of Ruby Amethyst that I played a couple weeks ago. This one was about as aggressive as it gets. I thought just be a fun change of pace to get to play, for the 1-drop Maleficent, as you can see there. A weak body, but puts Tular on the board, so really cool. And then Pascal for the evasive questing was very important. And then Minnie Mouse as well. So with 11 1-drops, it's really should be pretty easy to make sure you find a 1-drop. And with this deck, I always wanted to be playing something every turn. I just felt like I'd be, way behind or losing a lot of potential tempo if I didn't. And then, as you see there, at the 2-drop slot, you have Pinocchio, the 2 cost for 3 lore.
It's very aggressive.
Very fun. One of my favorite cards in the deck. And then LeFou next to him, which lets you ready a character. They can't quest again, but it, prevents your opponents from being able to challenge into your characters when they're ready. So it was always fun to, quest with Pinocchio and restand him. Or, just do some questing and then you could even restand something and sing with something in the case of Surfer Mini if you wanted to get your 2 lore, but then also use it to draw cards off of friends on the other side or something like that.
And of course, a great combo with him is the next card, Arthur.
Absolutely.
You can always throw LeFou back to your hand and then replay him to ready your Arthur so that your Arthur cannot be challenged.
I think that was one of the funnest parts about playing this deck was trying to set up an uninteractable loop. I know it can be kind of frustrating for opponents when they can't challenge any of your stuff, but especially, if you have LeFou on the board and you have Arthur, you quest with Arthur, he allows you to bounce LeFou back. You get 3 lore that way, and I guess 4 if you quest with LeFou first, and then you can just replay LeFou to ready Arthur again and, get ready to do that again next turn. So that's really fun. And then a lot of other ways to bounce back too with Madame M. Fox, as we've seen in other decks. There she is with the full 4 copies, and 4 copies of the Snake too, because all the bounce you can get in this deck is what you want. And then just a couple Maleficent, and I just found I was almost never playing her either. Often, always opting for the Minnie Mouse Surfer if I could over her, or even Arthur. But there were times toward the end of the game where I'd be in kind of top deck mode, and then it'd be nice to draw her, because a lot of the stuff in the deck's pretty cheap to play, so she probably draws you into another character you can play. And then, of course, everyone's favorite Minnie Mouse stylish surfer there at 4 copies, because she's just one of the strongest of aces right now. Not stat-wise, but just how early you can get her out for 3 costs and 2 lore. Definitely did a lot of heavy lifting there. And the GOAT, of course. Can't play this without the GOAT. There were definitely games where that came in big handy. And just the guaranteed lore on play, and then also when it leaves play. And with all the bouncing in this deck, that just, paired even better in here, I think. And then a couple rabbit, because again, really just trying to win the game in, 5 or 6 turns, ideally. So you don't always need a lot of draw, and it is uninkable, but just it is very nice to have if you are running low on cards, kind of toward your top end. And then Peter Pan's Shadow, I thought was very fun in this list. It was nice to, let's say the opponent had like an Exerted Maleficent 2/2 on the board. I remember one game in the tournament I was able to rush this in, clear that off, and then every turn thereafter just quest for 2 with Peter Pan, so that was really nice. And there was one time as well where I had the Fox on board already, and then that became evasive since it has rush, and they were both just able to quest and not be challenged for the rest of the game. So that was great. And lastly, the most expensive card, ink-wise, in the deck, I included a few copies of Goofy. And I wasn't really sure how that would go at first. I did ink him a lot, but there were a couple games against like a Sapphire Steel deck where I was able to play him out. And then he was able to survive to their Grab Your Swords plus large Tinkerbell combo. He was able to survive and quest for like 4 more lore a couple turns after that. So he did come in handy in some matchups. When the game was going longer. And then got some actions here. Just 1 copy of Befuddle. I did ink it quite a bit because I really like to always be developing. So if I could, play a 1-drop instead of using that, I'd usually opt for that. But it depended what the opponent was doing. So I do think a couple of times it did come in big handy with against like other Ruby Amethyst players where maybe they played a mini on turn 1. And then they bounced it back with the snakes, and all they have on board is a snake after 2 turns. And then if I could just befuddle their snake, it's like they're back to square one, and then I can use the rest of my ink that turn to develop even more. So that really helped, set up the tempo, keep it in my favor. And then here's Fan the Flames at a few copies, which is the same effect as LeFou, but a lot of times that did come in handy too, where I'd find I had 1 ink left. It's not enough to play LeFou, but I could just sneak in a Fan the Flames there and keep the characters ready to go for next turn. A couple copies of Teeth and Ambitions. I will say I don't feel like I played it that much during the tournament. I usually just inked it, but it was in there in case like I had a Minnie Mouse Surfer down and maybe the opponent were to play like a Peter Pan or a Fidget card that has evasive that could take them out, so that would help them there. Or even the Cruella or the Jafar from Sapphire and Steel that can challenge evasive, so it was more to protect any evasives I might have if they were threatened. And then 4 copies of Friends on the Other Side for the draw power, and then 2 copies of the Sorcerer's Spellbook.
See, I think this was a good choice of decks too, because the popularity of Ruby Amethyst lately, especially the kind of mid-range to late game control variant, like this really can outrace that quite quickly, and you can win well before they can get to the Be Prepared if you're drawing your most aggressive lines of play. So just based on how popular that deck has been, I think playing an aggressive deck that they don't have a lot of answers to early on is definitely a good choice right now.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I think it was kind of the deck I first tried out, or kind of a version of this, like when Set 2 just released. I remember seeing when Arthur got revealed, like it just seemed like a fun deck to play, and especially with the LeFou and the Pinocchios. So tried that in paper a little bit, so now I thought, why not take it to this tournament with some revisions, and I think it went really well. I was definitely worried about facing any Steel deck, and I did lose in the first round to Sapphire Steel, and it did go to 3 games, so it was still kind of competitive, but I do feel like in the 2 games I lost in that matchup, like I did fall quite a bit short. But then I was able to get a win against Sapphire Steel in the last round of the tournament as well, and that it just felt like a really tight game at the end, where if they were able to wipe everything, I probably wouldn't be able to get there. But I know the Goofy came in big that time, and I was able to get two victories that time and take a 2-0, so that was nice. But yeah, other than that, I did face a couple other Steel decks, but they were more aggressive versions, like with Tiana. So there was a Seal Amethyst deck I faced and a Seal Amber deck. And so we were both just being very aggressive, but the ability to restand characters and then also use like the rush characters in this deck to trade favorably into some of theirs, I think really helped give this deck the edge, at least how it played out.
I think this deck races very quickly too. It's kind of hard to outrace the 3 lore on Pinocchio and the extra lore you get when you bounce something with Arthur. And then Minnie, of course, if they don't have an answer to your evasives, she just is very effective at pushing lore early in the game. And then, Goats can help finish it off as well.
Yeah, because a lot of times too, the game would almost be over by the time the enemy would be on 6 ink. So I played a few matches against Ruby Amethyst, and I knew with everything like standing up, the only thing outside the Teeth and Ambitions they would really have, I guess they could play Dragonfire, but really didn't see any of that, would be the Tremaine on turn 6. And, if I have a wide board and they're all pretty cheap units, like that probably doesn't feel too good for them to play. And, I'm almost at that 20 lore at that point. So I felt like it was good against that match if they didn't find the Teeth and Ambitions. I did end up losing in round 7, I believe, to a Ruby Amethyst deck that was more the high-end control, and that went to 3 games, and they ended up finding in game 3, like, I want to say, like, 3 Teeth and Ambition, so that really hurt my Pinocchios and Maleficents and shut them out of questing, but I got to 19 lore, and I could tell they had the win on board if I didn't get a Goat or a Spellbook, and I did not get one, so a little bit of a bummer, but they definitely earned it. They kept me off that 20 very well. So
I will say the speed that this deck can win though is really fast, and I was playing a more grindy kind of slower ramp deck with control elements to it, and so sometimes I would still be in my first game and then my brother had already finished 2 rounds in like 5 minutes, so that was kind of crazy to me. And if you like a fast round, this is definitely a good option to consider, because you can definitely get the rounds done quickly. And if a game doesn't go perfect, you still have such an aggressive way to win with this deck that you can finish very quickly and still have a chance, if they draw kind of a slower hand or something like that. So
yeah, I was really surprised when I looked at the time and it's like, I played 2 games in 10 minutes, and so that was a lot of fun. I think win or lose, it's gonna go pretty quick. You're either gonna get to 20 or your hand will kind of peter out a little bit. But yeah, I think just maximizing the bounce back to your hand, especially like against Steel, what I did try to do would be to bounce my vulnerable characters like Pinocchio or Maleficent back if they were about to go into their Grab Your Swords or Tinkerbell turn, and then just play things with the 3 willpower or higher at that point. And then if they did have it, just also try to restand things when they had a big Tink on board so that they couldn't challenge one of my things and then ping something else for 2, because a lot of this has such low willpower that would have just wiped my board a lot of times. So there are ways to try to play around it, but I really was just hoping that I wouldn't run into much Steel. So and for the most part I didn't. And then I think I faced one Ruby Amber Mufasa deck, and I was able to just outrace that one too a little bit. So I think it is pretty well matched against most things, just maybe not the Steel, but it can still get wins. So overall, a lot of fun to play. And if you want to just be playing a more proactive deck and feel like you're I was playing something down, racing the opponent, but still being able to manipulate the board, then maybe this is a deck to give a try.
Now I will move on and talk about the deck that I played, which I called Tale as Old as Time, because it features a lot of characters from Beauty and the Beast. So this deck was fun. It was Sapphire Steel, and it focuses on ramping early, and then from there you kind of try to build a wide board and then remove some of their more annoying threats with certain key removal cards that I'll touch on. So in the 1-drops, I played 3 Captain Hook. I know a lot of Sapphire Steel decks right now aren't running any 1-drop characters, but when I kind of looked at, recently I've seen some aggressive decks being played where they just want to play, maybe a Lilo or something aggressive every turn and keep curving out their hand. And then a lot of Tiana too lately, they try to lock you out of the game with that. So I just didn't want boards to get out of control. So I put 3 Captain Hook in there just as a way to deal with early threats. Then Cruella and Jafar, I usually like to mix and match if there's basically an identical card. So I just put a put some of each of them in there just for variety. But yeah, they were great to handle the evasive minis that are kind of running wild in the format right now.
So probably trade pretty well with Simba.
And yeah, sometimes I did use them just to take out a bodyguard that was in the way of some aggressive lore threats on the board. So yeah, I was pretty aggressive in using them to trade early because I didn't want people to build a huge board. And then Mickey Mouse, he's kind of, I only had 2 of him. He's a great way to ramp up to 5 ink for turn 4. But then the uninkableness hurts a little because this deck does have a lot of uninkables in it. And there were times, especially in my first game, where I was stuck on 4 ink for like 3 turns in a row. And I ended that game with 19 lore and I couldn't play my beast for like 3 turns in a row. So that definitely hurt that game. But yeah, Mickey's a great way to just ramp to 5 if you miss your Fishbone Quill. I do play 4 copies of the Fishbone Quill. That's one of the only 2 items in the deck, and that's just a great way to accelerate your inking. Make sure that you can play more expensive cards earlier in the game, and then have targets on board that can sing, a lot of the songs in here that cost 5. But moving on, we have Benja in there because right now I know the Ruby Amethyst, the aggro deck that uses Spellbook, that's important to have a way to remove. And also the Amber Steel deck that uses Sleepy's Flute. Benja's a good target for that. Sometimes they play Lanterns in certain versions of that deck. So, that's another target. And then it's also good against Fishbone Quills in the mirror matchup because you want a way to kind of stop them from getting a lot of ink. Then I had 4 copies of Belle. She's a different way you can kind of ramp. I especially like her if you're going to do a whole new world because you can quickly get rid of your hand, get a new hand by singing it with a 5 cost. And then, on subsequent turns too, it's a very quick way to accelerate your inkwell and then play some of your stronger cards. 3 copies of Flaversham because he's great for card draw. He works well with the popsicles that help you draw cards. I played 2 Nick Wild because I really wanted a decent number of ways to keep your card draw engine going. So if you have already played the popsicle, he's a great way to get one back and continue to draw cards. Also, his 4 willpower is nice. A lot of times people will play Tinkerbell and Grab Your Swords together, and that does 3 to everything. So if he can just survive that, he's a nice way to quest for 2 lore. Cogsworth, really great against enemy steel decks, because especially if you can get a couple of those down, many of the steel cards deal 2 damage to things, and so once you have 2 Cogsworths down, your board is kind of insulated against Grab Your Swords and the ping damage from Tinkerbells and things like that. Then Tragic Hero Beast, he's very strong right now in the format. One of the only tools you have, I guess, to kind of fight back against Ruby Purple, if they don't have a way to damage him, you can try to fill your hand with cards to go up, play the longer game against them in case they have Be Prepareds, and he's a good way to try to refill your hand after a Be Prepared. So he's a lot of fun. And too, there are some times where if your opponent is playing big resist characters like Cinderella, if he ever takes a damage, then he will attack for 7 when it's your turn, so he can be used to remove some threats as well. Gaston, I played 2 copies of him because I really like the 3 lore on him. Sometimes I feel like this deck usually is playing from behind. As it's ramping in the beginning of the game, you're kind of losing the board. But once you can win the board back, if you have some higher lore threats like Gaston that allow you to kind of threaten a lot of lore generation, plus also look at the top 3 cards of your deck and take the best one into your hand. He's fun to kind of look for an answer when you need one. Tinkerbell, just great at handling early aggro characters, and removing boards that are going wide. Hades, he's a great answer to certain cards when you just want to shove it into their inkwell. So big things like a Cinderella that you can't damage easily, he's a great target for that. Or like Arthur, if you're against the Ruby aggression deck that my brother was playing, you really got to get Arthur off the table, and so you can use Hades or Smash or Let It Go, things like that. Nothing to hide.
So much removal, that's why I was definitely afraid to go against that deck. And the fact that you can ramp up, to those cards faster than other decks just also made it more difficult. But yeah.
Nothing to hide. I really did enjoy the concept of this one, but there were a lot of times where I wish I had it in hand and I just didn't have it. So sometimes before I would play a whole new world, I really wanted to see if if they had to be prepared, something like that. But I just didn't find this card in my hand very much when I wanted it, so I only had 2 copies. I could definitely consider playing a couple more. I also like that it cycles the card, so you get closer to other things that you want to see. 3 copies of Smash. I think that's really important to deal with. It's a different way to deal with like minis, Arthurs, any high questers too, like in the Mufasa green-yellow deck. They've got some evasives like Ray and Tinkerbell as well.
Yep.
That Smash deals with nicely. Let It Go is just another removal piece.
That one's really good against Mufasa since it doesn't banish Mufasa, so it doesn't get to trigger his ability.
And in the mirror matchup too, I really like to have as many Hades and Let It Goes as you can, so I would even consider playing a 4th one. It's just helpful. I feel like in that matchup, whoever's getting the wider board that's harder to deal with has the best chance of success. And Cogsworth is nice because his ward makes it so you can't just get rid of him that way. But definitely I like to use the Hades and the Let It Goes on Tinkerbells, Cinderellas, and especially Bells as well, because they will quest very quickly towards 20 once you're at 10 ink. Then A Whole New World, that's just, to get your hand refilled after you've kind of dumped everything into your inkwell for ramping purposes early. Sometimes if you find alternate card draw, you can avoid playing it, but oftentimes you do kind of need to at least do it once or twice in the earlier to mid game to kind of get what you want in place. And then Grab Your Sword, good for dealing with aggro units. And then Popsicle, of course, for the card draw. And the Fishbone Quill is, I think, one of the best cards in this deck. The games that I didn't find this were a lot less smooth, I guess you could say, than the games where I had this and was able to get to 5 ink on turn 4. And then once you Whole New World, you've got so many ways to just ink multiple times in a turn. And if you can get the board back at that point, you have more resources than your opponent most of the time. So that helps you just pull off some more powerful combos than what they can pay for with their ink. So overall, I really enjoyed this deck. It seemed pretty consistent. 2 of my losses were against the Ruby Amethyst control, and some of those were really close, but I got unlucky in a couple of the games where I think Be Prepared came down about 4 times in the first 20 cards. So I had a great board going that I just went all in after the 3rd one because I thought, it's very unlikely they have the 4th, and so I had 2 bells ready to go.
Sometimes they've got it.
And then the 4th one came down, and from that point on, it wasn't in my favor. But so that was probably my least favorite matchup, was the Ruby Amethyst control. Other than that, I think this performed very well into other matchups, and I think it definitely has the chance to make it pretty high in the current format. I do think, again, the Ruby Amethyst is probably its strongest contender, but it does very well against Steel. And it also does well against other forms of aggro. So as long as you don't have too slow of a start, and you find your ramp pieces early. And
yeah, I think against Ruby Amethyst, maybe your best bet is if you can generate a lot more card advantage or card draw than them. Like eventually they'll run out of removal, I guess.
Yeah,
but
and that was something I noticed.
Overcommit maybe to a board state, and then you get Be Prepared. Like you just gotta also try to play around that. But
I only had 3 Hiram, and I thought about playing a 4th one because there were some games where I just didn't quite find as much card draw as I wanted. And if you're kind of stuck, unable to draw additional cards, you can't generate the same kind of value that you can when your Popsicle Hiram package is online. So yeah, there was one game in particular. It was like the second game against Ruby Amethyst, and I got to go first. But I started with A Whole New World in my hand, and I decided to get rid of it because I didn't want to draw into multiple copies in my opening hand, and I thought for sure I would find some card draw. And for basically the entirety of that game, I found characters that didn't draw any cards, no Popsicles and no Hiram, and no Whole New World. So it was very rough, and I was not able to create the kind of tempo that you want with this deck. So I do think it's important to make sure you find some card draw mechanic kind of early on, just to keep the gas churning. But overall, it was very, very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Had some amazing opponents, some tight matches, but I enjoyed my 6-3 finish, and it felt like a nice start to participating in these tournaments.
Yeah, and then it was fun to watch the top 8 the next day, and yeah, it was a 270 player tournament, so we were very pleased and happy with how we did, and a lot of fun. So if anyone's considering doing a tournament like this yourself, I know another one is happening, I want to say the second weekend from now, put on by the pack as well. I think it's called Merlin Strikes Back. So, if anyone's interested, that will be coming right up. And other than that, though, I think it's always fun to try to decide on a deck to play, and then to wonder what everyone else will be bringing. And sometimes if you just go with a consistent deck, it might pay off. But I do think they were looking at that top 8, a lot of variety, so that was really fun to see. And I know as set 3 it gets closer and closer, like that'll just bring a lot more new decks as well and different strategies. But yeah, I think there's still a lot more to be explored in set 2 here still. So, but yeah, big tournaments are fun, and looking forward to the next one we enter, whenever that may be. But yeah, now we're gonna go into the spoiler of the week. So we went with Fang River City. This is a location card, and so far at the time of this reveal, it was definitely probably the most exciting looking location to me. 4 costs inkable, and it has a payment or a movement cost of 2 and a willpower of 6. And this location has 2 lore that will generate the start of your turn, and then it has the ability Surrounded by Water. Characters gain ward and evasive while here. So those are 2 powerful keywords, and when you combine them together, it just sounds even more powerful. So yeah, it seems like it has a lot of potential right out of the gate. I think opponents will either really want to challenge this and get it out of there really quickly, or they'll just hope they're running some evasive characters of their own so they can challenge whatever you decide to move here.
Yeah, I think if this card becomes really popular, then people will need to play enough evasives to just deal with whatever ends up there, because Ward, of course, makes a lot of actions and targeted effects useless against characters that would be at Fang. So,
and of course, a character like Maui or anything with Rush could always, try to threaten a location like this. And so, yeah, people already run Maui a lot in the Ruby deck, so I would not be surprised, especially with, all the locations seem to have kind of higher willpower. So, maybe reckless characters are great to have on the board in set 3 to just constantly deal with those types of cards. And yeah, I think we will also take a look at a card here that seems to pair very well with Fang.
Yeah, so Jim Hawkins, this was the only legendary revealed so far from set 3, but his effect, when you play him, you may play a location with the cost 4 or less for free. So Fang definitely fits that criteria right here. So you could play Jim Hawkins when you have 5 ink, and then you could also play Fang on that same turn without paying any additional ink. And then when you play a location, Jim Hawkins is allowed to move there for free. So he can immediately then move to Fang instead of paying the 2 that you would normally need to pay to move something to Fang. And then he would become a ward evasive 4/4 with 2 lore, making him a lot safer against what your opponent might have on the field.
So that just sounds pretty incredible to me, like from ink savings, because you're only paying 5 for Jim, but then you're getting the 4 ink value of the location and then the 2 ink value for moving him there. So it's kind of like for 5 ink you're getting 11 ink worth of value. So, and with a location that's as good looking as this one, like if the opponent can't deal with it in a timely manner, then you might just start to run away with the game. So
yeah, I think this
looks powerful.
Location seems stronger too if you have kind of controlled your opponent's board so that they can't just attack into this immediately and before you can get that 2 lore on the next turn from Fang, and also lose the effects that it provides. So I think it'll be an interesting balance of like controlling their board, controlling locations they might have, and yeah, there might be a lot more combat challenging type things happening in set 3 if locations are popular, because you can't just afford to leave them on the board generating free lore every turn. And decks that previously relied on Be Prepared to get rid of all the lore threats, Be Prepared won't touch locations, so they'd have to have characters that could challenge the locations and then Be Prepared on the same turn, just to make sure they can remove these as efficiently as possible. So it's going to be interesting how these really shake up the game, and I'm very excited to see more locations.
Yeah, I wonder, in terms of Be Prepared, like currently maybe if you feel your opponent's about to do that, and let's say you're playing a Mufasa deck, you might drop Mufasa down, so you have a character that he generates after the Be Prepared. I wonder if people will try to drop a location right before Be Prepared. But I guess if the Ruby Amethyst or whatever
They might already have a
combination
Maui
is.
or something
Right.
on board that could just remove this.
So I guess it depends on the board state, but if it looked clear, you could drop one and kind of as insurance against to be prepared, so you'd still be getting value afterwards. And I gotta say, the art on this, I absolutely love it. I really enjoyed the movie too, Raya and the Last Dragon. I've seen it a couple times.
I think this really captures the
movie.
feel of that film.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll look at one more card that might synergize with this location, and that is Peter Pan, Lost Boy Leader. Big fan of Peter, so this is a great looking card. I'm not sure how competitive it'll be. We'll have to see, but
I think it'll be
like it's
probably
got
pretty
great
effective
potential.
in a location-based deck.
Yeah, so he costs 4. He's inkable, and he has 3 strength and 3 willpower, and then he has 1 lore and the ability I came to listen to the stories, and it says once per turn when this character moves to a location, gain lore equal to that location's lore. So in the case of Fang, if you move Peter Pan to Fang by paying the 2 movement costs, you would instantly gain 2 lore from the location. And then I suppose if Peter can quest, he could quest for another lore, and then you've gained 3 lore like that, plus you got the 2 from when Fang was already in play at the start of your turn, assuming that it was. So I mean, potentially you could have gotten 5 lore out of Fang and then moving Peter to it and then questing with Peter in one turn. So that's pretty explosive, and that's just having one character in play. So I think with the right setup, it could be very strong.
There's a Ruby action, I Have a Dream, I think it's called, and that, readies a character at a location, and then you gain lore equal to that location's lore. So even that right there, like a red-green deck maybe with Jim Hawkins, Fang, Peter Pan, I Have a Dream, it could be very, very explosive and kind of frustrating for the opponent to figure out, like, do I remove these characters first, the locations? And it's just going to be an interesting give and take.
Yeah, I think already cards like the Spellbook and the Goat and Sleepy's Loot and just cards that can gain you, extra lore, regardless of what else you have going on the board, are, pretty powerful in set 2. And so now with extra ways to kind of gain surprise lore, I think that'll really just shake up the game and make it even more explosive or, perhaps unpredictable in a way. But I think that would take it all into account.
I think that would be
try
good.
To play around things. But
I think unpredictability would be good because it's good to have variety in the game so that a lot of different things might be viable and just give people more of a chance to play something they might really want.
And it's exciting because we've only seen like a small fraction of set 3 so far, and what we have seen, like a lot of it looks pretty interesting and potentially impactful. So yeah, I'm really liking the look of it and the theme of Into the Inklands, like the adventurous kind of exploration vibe. So yeah, we're really excited for that, and it's coming up. It's only like a month away or just under. So it's pretty exciting.
The hype is definitely building.
But yeah, we hope you enjoyed this recap of the tournament and a little sneak peek at some cards that are upcoming from set 3. And thank you so much for listening in, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Yep, see you later.